I have decided to make a video about my freshman year high school English teacher. I didn't like her for a number of reasons. I'm not going to mention her name, but I think it might be an interesting video to just in general talk about various things that she did. As far as I know, she didn't usually act like this. Most of my classmates seem to really like her, so I don't fully understand that. You know how at the beginning of the school year, usually you you act kind of the same around all teachers until you figure out how these different teachers usually act, like their teaching styles, how they interact with students. Well, at the beginning of the school year, I was doing that with this teacher, and I guessed completely wrong. So the first book that she had us read was called Sleeping Freshmen Never Lie. And it is I don't know if it's the worst book I've ever read, but it's very, very bad. It's very simplistic. The main character's motivations are completely superficial. Everyone in the book is complete stereotypes. It's very bland, and it's just kind of like, I guessed pretty much nearly every single plot beat after reading chapter 1. It's not hard. It's such a basic story. Like, you could take out there's a subplot with a suicide attempt, and there are a few instances of the word bitch in there. If you removed that from the story, which wouldn't really change the story much, it would be at a 3rd grade reading level probably, and this was assigned in 9th grade, and it's just kind of I was just reading this and I thought, oh, okay, this is a teacher who just straight up does not care. She's just assigning this book because it has freshman in the title. She doesn't actually care about the book. She doesn't care about whatever. She's just doing whatever because she doesn't care, right? I was wrong, okay? Apparently this is her genuinely one of her favorite books ever. She loves this book. And before I found that out, I wrote as kind of a joke, I wrote this short essay explaining everything I hated about the book, going into a lot more detail. I'm not gonna rant about that book here, that's not what this is about. But anyways, I wrote this short essay on how much I hate this book and how stupid it is, and I tried giving it to her, and she wouldn't even read it. She was so offended when I tried giving her this essay, and she was like, I'm not even gonna read it, it's gonna be insulting to me personally. Again, she wouldn't read it, she just assumed I was insulting her in the book, and she was going on about how it's her favorite book ever and how amazing it is, and yeah, that kind of jump-started her just not liking me at all, right? And it's just I don't know, maybe it was a mistake to write that. Probably was. I just wanted to express my opinion and have a discussion with the English teacher about this book, which, as I would find out, she hates that. She really did not like having any discussions about books that didn't just fall into how she saw it. When we finished reading the book, she was like, we're gonna watch a movie that's similar to this book, and she was like, I really wish that this book had a movie adaptation, which it doesn't. I don't see why it would, bottom of the barrel Netflix original movies aren't as stupid as this book. This is I'm serious. And so she played The Princess Bride, which is, first of all, it's a completely different movie, but she was trying to compare this cookie cutter stereotypical shallow and meaningless story to The Princess Bride. And say what you will about The Princess Bride, but it's not a coming of age crappy little romance high school story. It's there's an adventure, there's all these fantasy elements, it's funny, whether or not you really think it's funny. There are jokes, and there's action, and there's all these very creative and unique things within the movie. Regardless of whether or not you like the movie or not, there's a lot of unique things to the movie. If it's I would never really call it stereotypical. I mean, there's some kind of stereotype. There's more to the movie. Anyway, that's the point. And also another thing, back to I mentioned that there's a suicide subplot in in Sleeping Freshmen Never Lie, like there's an attempted suicide by this one boy who's constantly being like bullied because people don't like him, I guess. And honestly, like the reasons he has are very serious, and it's like one of the few things in the book that actually is like, I don't know, I wouldn't call it compelling. It's still very shallow in the way it's handled, but still, it's like, it's a serious thing. And then the teacher was constantly making jokes about it and making fun of the fact that some teenagers get depressed, and she was going on about how funny it was that the kid who talks a lot tried to hang himself. And I'm like, that's not funny. I don't care if you're trying to talk about irony, but like, you're in a classroom full of teenagers. Like, show some respect. Be polite. If you can talk about this subplot because it's in the story that you mentioned, but handle it with some kind of respect. You're a teacher. It was so inappropriate, and she was constantly going like, oh, it's so funny. Like, whenever like there's like characters that are like depressed or have like social anxieties or anything, she would constantly make fun of it. Later on, when we read Romeo and Juliet, in the earlier scene where like Romeo is at a party and he's in the corner and he's like awkward, she went in the corner of the classroom and did this like impression of an awkward teenager at a party, and it's like, rather like, maybe I guess some people find that funny, but like in a room full of mostly awkward teenagers, like, don't make fun of your students like that. I mean, I'm all for making, like, teachers who, like, sometimes make fun of their students when they're, like, all jokey and exaggerated, like, because there's teachers who are like that, right? But the way she would do it, it's like she was making fun of the entire concept of students, like, being awkward at all or being depressed, and she would constantly do this whenever it came up in any story or any kind of context, and I'm just like, what are you doing? That's just so rude. I was just like, what do you even think that you're trying to do here? You're just trying, like, you're a teacher, this is kind of inappropriate, like, what are you trying to do here? Another thing that she did during when we read like Romeo and Juliet, which was after Sleeping Freshmen Never Lied, she would, can you be quiet?
Try to be quiet.
Okay, you keep making these moaning noises.
No, really?
Oh,
Alright,
never
one
mind.
second, I gotta go.
Okay. Another thing that she did while we were reading Romeo and Juliet, actually she did this like all throughout the school year, is she was constantly going on about like true love and love at first sight, and how romantic the idea is. It's not like the worst thing ever. I mean, it's one of the lesser things that she's done. Like, okay, like, you're all about true love, but like, she was like, one day she was like asking, she was like, go, everybody, like, when you go home, like, go ask your parents like the story of how they got together or whatever, and talk about how much they love each other. And it's like, okay, first of all, we live in the United States. Like, the divorce rate in the United States is very high. Like, it's not, I'm not saying it's like super bad that she did this, but it's just kind of like, on the day she told us to do that, my father had sold his wedding ring. Like, my parents were getting divorced during this whole time. Anyway. Oh, and another thing I just remembered is when we watched, like, The Princess Bride, she refused to turn on the subtitles. And freshman year, it was before I had gotten ear surgery, so I was partially deaf, and I had a lot of trouble following like movies, because sometimes like you don't see the characters like lips moving, like if they were like covered by something or facing away from the camera. Like, I found it harder to like follow it in movies in general. So I asked her politely to turn on the subtitles, and she gave me the script to like the first few scenes of the movie. Like, she gave me the script and she refused to turn on the subtitles. And there was so many times when we would be watching movies or various videos throughout the school year, and she would refuse to turn on the subtitles for me, even though it was hard of hearing. Eventually, I think she started agreeing to do it later on because she was told that she had to do that. But yeah, it was just so rude. Like it cost like a couple seconds. Just turn on the subtitles so your student can understand what's going on. It's very rude. Another thing is that we read this short story, The Cask of Amontillado, and when she told us we were going to be reading it, I was like, oh, is that one story where the dude like bricks up the other guy in his basement or whatever? And then a few minutes later, without really acknowledging what I had said, she just told me like to leave the room. Later, somebody told me that it was because I spoiled the end of the story, even though I was just trying to remember what the story was because I didn't fully remember the title. I was like, oh, is that the story? And but like she didn't tell me why she sent me out of the room. She just sent me out of the room. She was like, you know what you did. I'm like, I don't know what I did. What are you talking about? And she just like, she made me leave for a bit. And then I came back and she was like, okay, you're back. And she actually sent me out of the room for so many times, and most of the time she never actually gave me a reason. I think there's maybe 6, 7, maybe 10 different times when she would like send me either out of the room or to the office, and every time I ended up in the office they would be so confused because she wouldn't like tell them that she sent me there, and then later she would never actually tell them why she sent me to the office. Like she wouldn't write me up, she would just make me leave the classroom and go to the office, and sometimes she would like mark me off for assignments that I would miss while I was in the office, and she wouldn't let me make them up, and I would just be like, okay, why did you do this? Like she would just send me out there. There are a few times when she actually like gave me vague reasons for sending me out of the room, like at the beginning of the school year. Like the class was at the end of the day. It was the last class of the day. And we would have to like put up the chairs at the end, right? And one time I was trying to get the chair on, but I was just like, I'm very uncoordinated. I was trying to put the chair on, but I kept dropping the chair, and she wrote me up that time for throwing the chair across the room. I never really got punished for that because it was stupid. I was just failing to stack chairs because I'm incompetent, which is fine because I'm a student, but she's a teacher. She's just... And another time, at the beginning of class, I was wearing a hat, right? I like wearing hats. I was wearing a hat for most of the school day, but when I got to her room, she's like, you can't be wearing that hat in here. And I'm like, okay. And I took it off after like a brief argument, and I put it in my desk, and at the very end of the period I put the hat back on so I wouldn't have an extra thing to carry while I was like going back to my locker. And she was like super mad at me. She was like, you're going to the office. And then she was like, you go to the office for wearing that hat in my class. You're being insubordinate. And then I went to my locker and then left. I wasn't about to miss the school bus because of her nonsense. I didn't get in trouble for that either, and I just stopped wearing hats in her class because I didn't want to deal with that. But it's just kind of like, whatever. Another thing is that during the period where we were talking about Cask of Amontillado, we also watched like this video adaptation of it, and I don't know if you've ever seen this version of it. It is very disturbing. Like, I mean, it's kind of like there's a spectrum when you're watching it. It's kind of like the Uncanny Valley spectrum. If you're watching this adaptation of this story, you're either going to find it very funny or you're going to be disturbed. I found it kind of funny because of the over-the-top acting, but it's like, if you don't find that funny, you're going to be extremely disturbed by this video because it's very, I don't know, graphic's the word. This guy chains up the other guy and bricks him up just for a mild insult, and it's very, like, he's very over the top, and if you don't find that funny, you're gonna be disturbed. I looked around the classroom a few times, and there were so many of my classmates who were just sitting there, and they looked very horrified. Like, reading about it was one thing, but actually watching this and, like, trying to visualize this concept actually occurring on screen, it's just like, you're just like, what? It is very, like, it is kind of disturbing. I'm not saying, like, I like, it is fiction. I'm just like, okay, it's a crazy man doing this ridiculous thing, but it's kind of like, if you and it was freshman year, and there was so many kids in there who were just so nervous, and a lot of the ones who were looking more nervous were like, oh, can I go use the bathroom so I don't have to watch this? And it was just very maybe not the best choice of what to watch in class, I guess. I don't know. There was another thing that we did in class. Not all teachers do this. I don't remember ever doing this since I was in elementary school. It's a thing that teachers kind of do when you're younger to encourage participation. But basically what it is for every class, the teacher has sticks, and each stick has the name of a student, and they will randomly during class, whenever they have a question, just pick a stick out of the cup, and the person whose name is on that stick has to answer the question, right? And
I just want to say that some classes have those, but they don't. It's not just for a question. Sometimes they call on people who they think aren't paying attention, or they just use it for specific things. Sometimes it's for other things other than just a question.
Yeah, I mean, usually it's for questions, though. Yeah. But you're right. They're used for many things. Usually it's to encourage participation, right? And you could tell. I mean, at least I could tell when she was about to call my name, because the look of disgust on her face was just she would be upset. And whenever I answer, are you okay?
I'm okay.
Okay, he's coughing. Anyways, whenever I would answer a question correctly or would give more of an answer than she wanted, the more correct my answer would be, she would be so upset. She would look so upset with me. The anger on her face was just why are you upset that I'm answering your questions correctly? I don't know. She just got upset. One time I pretended that I wasn't paying attention. I knew the answer, but I was just I have no idea what the answer is. She's like, oh, are you sure you don't know the answer? I'm like, yeah, I have no clue what it is. I'm so confused right now. Maybe you should call on someone else. I knew what the answer was, and she looked so happy. I'm like, okay. You look happy. You're I don't know. It made her very pleased when I pretended not to know the answer. It was really funny. I didn't do that again, though. At some point, I think towards the end of the school year, she just in general stopped calling on me. Except for one time, it was either the principal or the vice principal came in to observe the teacher. Because they do that sometimes, but you could tell that he was only there during the period I was. Because he came in with us and he set up his stuff, for note-taking during that time. And it was the last class of the day, like I already said. So clearly he was in there for that class. And the only person that the teacher was really having a problem with was me. And for that period, she completely just ditched the whole popsicle stick system. Whenever she had a question, whenever she needed input, she only asked me. And if someone else was talking, but I raised my hand because I wanted to add something, she would be like, oh, let's go see what Jamie has to say. And it was just very kind of funny because she was always asking, she never ever did that at any other point. She was just during that time when the principal was in there, she was constantly asking my opinion on everything and if I had any ideas on what we were talking about. It was very... Bird, are you okay?
She's angry at the thing that's
She's angry. She's an angry little bird. Anyways, she would be very upset with me when I answered questions correctly, but on that one time she was just oh, let's see what Jamie has to say. And if it's she knew what she was doing. It was just really funny. And there was something else that she would do. I can't say for definite. It might just be me speculating. But sometimes I think she may have, looked for ways, any possible way that she could to lower what grade I got on things like essays. On the midterm, she's the one who could grade it, right? And I got a barely passing grade. Can you calm down? I'm trying to record a video. Can you calm down just for a little bit?
I'm gonna look to see if I can get her a snack, cut off a chunk of that.
Get her a snack. That sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, pause the recording for a minute. Because I've been drinking water to stay hydrated.
So anyways, on the midterm, what she graded I had all perfect on the multiple choice, but on the essay, where it's kind of subjective how you grade it, every point that could have been taken off was taken off, and even things that were like technically done correctly, they were done in kind of a way that like she could figure out a way to take points off. Maybe I'm just lying about this, maybe I'm like projecting, but on the final, which teachers can't grade their own students' finals, at least at my school, I got a near perfect score on everything, and it was a very similar test. What we actually had to write about was slightly different, but it was like different reading passages, basically the same test. One was graded by the teacher who hates me, one was graded by someone else. Another example where it's much more clear, so everyone in the class had an assignment, right? It was a homework, and apparently most of my classmates struggled on the homework. I don't know, most of them, there was several people in the class who were confused about it. So what the teacher did was, she had like this slideshow, right, or whatever, I don't remember what she used, and basically on it there was copied answers that were incorrect from various students, and we had to go around and, analyze what was wrong with them so we could go over it, right? It sounds like a really good idea. That was the only time she's ever done it. I've never heard of any other teacher doing this, but you know what? For a class where that's like struggling, this sounds like a very good idea to like deconstruct what's actually wrong with the questions, right? But before this happened, I got my stuff back, and I was like looking, and some of my responses were marked incorrect, and I was like asking the teacher, hey, like, speaking in class, can you like explain what I did wrong? Like, can you just explain what I did wrong? And she's like, you'll see. And she like smirked, like she was like very like, oh, you'll see what's gonna happen. And then I found that, and like my response was up there on that slideshow, and she asked like 4 different students to point out what was wrong with my response. It didn't say it was my response, it was just like anonymous like the rest of them, but she kept asking people, can you find what is wrong with this response? And no one could do it. And the reason, what was wrong with the response was she didn't like it. That's the reason I did poorly on that homework. She was like, you did poorly on this thing because I didn't like it. I guess I worded it slightly differently. Like, she might have had some more explanation, but I do remember she was like, she didn't like it. She's like, it's technically correct, but I didn't like it, so that is why it is wrong. And I was just sitting like, what are you talking about? I was just so like, just utterly baffled, like sitting in there, and I was just, like, she was like this the whole like this whole school year. In all honesty, there's probably a ton of things that I've forgotten about this point because it was like years ago, but like it's still just like, it was just crazy. And like the worst thing about it is that was the last year she taught. She retired after that, so she's no longer at the school. And I'm just like, oh, you couldn't have retired a year earlier, so I'm gonna have to have dealt with this. I don't know. I mean, it's over. I no longer care about her really, and it was just, this was a thing that happened. It is over now. I just wanted to make this video because I thought it was interesting, and I kind of want to remember this in the future to see if I ever have like a teacher that was like worse than this, like a teacher who just like sends me out of the class, usually for no reason, and even when there is a reason, there's just like, it's so flimsy and nonsensical, and it's just like, I don't know, like, am I ever gonna find another teacher who likes to make fun of depression and will not accommodate disabilities? Like, I don't know. Let's see. If I do, I'll have this for reference to see who's better or worse. Probably won't make a follow-up to this unless something worse does happen. So far, most of my teachers have been pretty okay, or great on one end, okay at the other, and then you have this English teacher like way over here, like absolutely obnoxious and terrible. That's all I have to say. If anyone enjoyed my rant, please comment, and I might rant about other things that I kind of care about, and maybe things I actually do care about, and at the current point of my life. I don't know. We'll see. That's over. Paul, do you have anything to say?
Like, comment, and subscribe.
What he said. Another thing that she did is at one point we were reading the short story The Raven. It's more of a poem than a short story. I think it's kind of a combination of both. But anyways, I'm not going to explain like the full story, but in the story at no point do they mention like the gender of the protagonist or the relationship the protagonist has to like the woman that they're crying over. And it's kind of like this relationship could have been anything. It could have been two women. It could have been brother and sister. They could have been cousins. They could have been related. And their relationship could have been anything, right? And like you don't even know like if Lenore is like is a human being. Like it could have been like anything, like just a female individual that the protagonist cares about. And it's like this is like a whole discussion we could have had, right? And in class, like we were having a discussion about different interpretations of different parts of the story, right? And I wanted to bring up this whole theory I had about how it's not necessarily a man grieving over his dead wife. Like the relationship could have been anything, right? Like there's no way of really knowing because it's not explicitly stated, and it could have been like a whole discussion. But anyways, I raised my hand and she called on me, and I was like, you know, at no point do they ever say what the gender of the main character is. And she said lesbians didn't exist back then, and then wouldn't let me continue talking, and then just moved on. Like that was the whole situation. It was very confusing. I didn't even try like bringing up the other stuff I was gonna say, and I was just like, what? That's not true. Like, what are you doing?
Wait. You think she actually believed that they just didn't exist before it was like considered like not like a mental illness or whatever it was considered before?
Well, first of all,
I'm pretty sure it was.
Yeah, and depending on where you lived, like certain places would like treat like being gay as like a mental illness. Although there are a lot of cultures that like just readily accepted not being straight. Like
most cultures seem cool.
Like ancient Greece was extremely gay. There's a lot of examples. You can do research, but like before it, like there's certain times depending on where you were, it was or wasn't socially acceptable. Yeah. But she was just straight up like, oh, those kind of relationships didn't exist. There weren't gay people back then. There weren't lesbians, and I was just so confused. Like, first of all, it's not what I was gonna say. Second of all, that's not true. Third of all, what the fuck? I mean, come on. It was just so weird. There was a lot of points. I can't remember anything more specific than that situation, but in general, she kind of treated like being in a straight relationship as like the ideal relationship and like super romantic and perfect and stuff, and it's just kind of like, no. I don't know. She just like, she had some opinions, this teacher.